this on? Is this on? On? Allow us to come and talk a little bit about Shippable. And what I'm going to talk today about is a lot about what is modern DevOps. Like, we have heard a lot about what is DevOps. Unfortunately or fortunately, we are working on modern DevOps, which is a little ahead of DevOps. So I'm going to talk about why we did it and how we did it and what the concept behind it is, and that's what this talk is about. My name is, again, Avi Kavale. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Shippable. We started Shippable about 2.5 years ago. We were one of the first 5 companies to use Docker in production about 2.5 years ago. And we've been using Docker today. We run about roughly, so the moment you start asking these questions, everybody starts doing this thing. And what ends up happening after this is you start creating checklists. How many people here have checklists to go to production? Pretty much everybody here, right? So this is the problem, right? You have Excel spreadsheets, and I got to go get approvals here. I got to go, did you do this? Did you do that? And all I needed to do was I had a typo in one of the variables, and it's crashing the system, and I want to make that change. And that's all I'm trying to do, right? And that's the problem. And the issue with these 2 questions is this is what happens. So most people think that there are no more issues in our system, and the way they get there is by slowing everything down. And that is a bad thing for today's businesses. Like in 2000, the number of companies that existed on FTSE 100, only 15% of those companies still are in business. And it's even like NASDAQ 100, only 50% of those companies are still in business. And the reason for this is very simple. You go build a feature and put it out there. There are 8 people who are waiting to copy that, and in 2 weeks they will have that feature in their system. So you spent 6 months innovating, and they just copied it in like just in 2 weeks. So the only way you can survive is to actually speed up. You got to out-innovate everybody and keep on doing things bigger and bigger and bigger and faster and faster and faster. But those 2 questions make you slow down, or you start finger pointing. I mean, that's basically the fundamental issues. So if you kind of boil this down, change is pretty much the root cause of all of these outages. Majority of the thing. I mean, 8 out of 10 times it's probably change that causes this. The issue is business requires change, otherwise your company won't exist. I mean, you'll be a dodo in about 2-3 years, and it doesn't make any sense for you to slow down. So you got to go faster. So what we need to do is, as a company, you got to start embracing change. And you should say that this is part and parcel of our business, and this is what we are here to do. We have software engineers to keep changing stuff, and we have operations to keep things stable. So unfortunately, it's a big issue, and that's where DevOps kind of starts coming in. So what I define DevOps, I mean, I don't want to try to define anything as a universal thing. All I say DevOps is if your company has a culture of embracing change, you're probably doing DevOps. If your company is all about preventing change and slowing things down just because you're afraid that things will break, then you're not doing DevOps. I mean, that's basically how you kind of define it. I don't care what tools you use. I don't care what script you use. I don't care whether you're on Unix, .NET. I don't care. If your company's culture is about, I want to make changes because the company will not exist if I don't make changes, you're probably on the DevOps track. And the rest of this talk will start meaning something at that point of time, right? I mean, that's kind of definition. So what we did at Shippable is we were a startup. I won't even worry about what we are doing. So what we did is survive and beat all our competition. Because we are a startup, we had to embrace this very tightly. So we said, we're going to be the best DevOps company in the world to build whatever software. Unfortunately or fortunately, we are building DevOps stuff, but we want to use practices ourselves first. So what happened is, if you look at it, this is a traditional software development. You kind of do change required, some development occurs, unit testing occurs, functional testing occurs, deployment occurs, eventually you're up and running. This is kind of like the life cycle. Different people have different time on this. Some people do this in 1 day, some people do this in 3 months, some people do this in 3 years. It doesn't really matter, but everything kind of goes through this kind of workflow, in a kind of workflow process. So the issue is, if you embrace DevOps, the hope is you'll compress this. You're going to somehow bring this closer so that you can do things much faster. I mean, that's basically the philosophy of it. And we did it, and we did all the stuff that people talked about. And we only saw 15 to 20% improvement. And this was huge, right? I mean, if you think about it, at Xbox Live, I was at Kinect, I was managing about 150 people, about 18-month program. If you can save 20% of your time, you almost save anywhere between 30 to 50 man years or person years of development by compressing it by that much. It's a huge deal. But the issue is, why is it only 20%? Why is it not 50%? Why is it not 70%? So we started digging deeper because 20% was not good enough. So what we saw was, the first issue was the org silos existed in the entire infrastructure. So even any team, there was org silos. I'm an architect, I'm a dev, I am a backend guy, I'm an Angular person, I'm something else, whatever it is, right? These silos existed. The second problem you had was, because the silos existed, every company has built a vertically optimized tool chain. So for every single person, there is a special tool. There is QTP for the person who wants to do a particular kind of test. There is something else, Meteor.js, for somebody else who wants to do something else. Then there's Jenkins, and there's this. So what ended up happening is there is this whole bunch of vertically optimized tool chains because startups build things that they can sell. So if your organization is siloed, then you are going to build vertically optimized solutions. And everything does a little bit of the other thing next to them, but nobody does it cleanly across the board. So that was the second problem. But the most important problem was the deployable image was getting built the last. And that was where the problem started for us. Because you're doing, if you think about DevOps, the way I define, the way people think what DevOps is about, I'm using Chef, Puppet, Salt, whatever I'm using, right? It's about taking something that existed in one place, programmatically moving it into another place. Right? That's what everybody's trying to achieve. But the unfortunate part, the key message here is programmatically. If I'm worried about my code doesn't work that actually I built feature for, why do you think your DevOps code actually works? So it's just, now you have to test the DevOps code, which means you've gone back into this whole cycle of how do I test the code to deploy the code that I've just tested. So it's just a whole mess, right? And the biggest issue is, I'm writing in Node.js. Why the hell am I writing it in Ruby? Why do I need Ruby developers now? Because my app is all Node.js, or my app is all Java, I'm writing Ruby, or my app is all .NET, I'm now writing it in Java or something else for like Salt or whatever. I don't know all of the DevOps technologies that's out there. So that was the main issue. So to summarize it, 20% is not a revolution, it's an evolution. What we were looking for was a revolution. We needed something that will disrupt all of this technology and change the game across the board. So that's where we said the biggest problem was the deployable image being built the last. Why don't we do that first? And then try to use that, and instead of doing deployment all over again, why don't we just deploy the same thing into test and inspect it? The difference is, in dev, the inspections are different, and in test, the inspections could be something else, or in stress test, the inspections are something else. It's maybe load and something else. So you're just inspecting the same thing again and again and again. And so we started digging with containers. And fortunately or unfortunately bumped into Solomon at Docker, and he said, oh, we are doing exactly this, why don't we collaborate? And so that's how we started this whole thing about Docker, and this was even before Docker was open source. And so what I consider is, once you embrace that DevOps, which is, hey, it's a culture of change, and we accept change as the natural thing that happens on a daily basis, what we did at Shippable was, how do we make it a fact? So you have this culture, how do I take it to make it a fact? And that's what we call it as DevOps. So what I define DevOps is frictionless, agile, continuous, and transparent platform that moves your applications through dev to production. That's all I think of it, right? The keyword here is frictionless. There should be nothing that slows you down during that entire workflow. Anything that slows you down, you should take it out of the system. And usually it's humans. And so you have to think about how to actually do this, and that's what DevOps culture is, right? So let's talk about it in this way. So frictionless is the Mount Everest. It's the utopia that you're trying to achieve. So I want to go from the other end. So transparent. So if you're not doing DevOps and you want to do only one thing this year in the next 3 months, what I would do is do this. So create transparency. So that means every single thing that happens in your company should be available as information to every single person in your company. And that's all it is. So we use Slack and GitHub to do this. You can use anything. You can use HipChat, you can use IRC, you can use whatever the hell you want to use. You can use Jira, but this is the things that we're putting there are what we use at Shippable, right? So the point is, everything starts in a chat room, and everything ends in a chat room. And so if I have a distributed organization, I wake up at 6 in the morning, I can actually look at what all happened when I was asleep. And it's all there. I don't need to go and ping 10 people to say, what's the status, what's the status. It's all there in the chat room. I mean, that's basically how we think about it. So to kind of show it, here is how business requirement, support, as well as production errors, all are going into Slack. So even our logging system is actually going into Slack. So if I see exceptions in the Slack room, I immediately know something is broken. I don't need to go run grep commands on a whole bunch of servers to figure out if something is wrong or not. I mean, that's basically the point. The second piece is you have to make it continuous. So you have to do CI on every single pull request. Not like once an hour, not once in 4 hours, not once a day. I'm talking about every single pull request. And the idea of that is everything creates was we had 800 test people in an offshore team, and every day morning we would come with like 250, 300 bugs on the prior day's code, and not a single developer said I caused any one of those. I mean, that's the problem, right? And I got paid all the money at Microsoft. Every single penny I made at Microsoft was assigning bugs to developers. That's all I did. And I was the boss saying, you are going to work on this bug. It says, I didn't create it. Doesn't matter. You're going to work on it. Right? So that's the point. So with this kind of concept where every single pull request is getting built, if a bug occurs, I know which pull request caused the bug. And I know who caused that pull request. And that means I know who exactly is the developer I'm going to go after. Better yet, the developer, him or her, already knows that it's broken, so they've already fixed it. They don't even need me. So my whole point is, DevOps is about job elimination, and I should start by eliminating my job first. And if I'm a manager is gone, then all developers become autonomous and all changes go into production, and we're all good, and we'll probably win. I mean, that's basically the concept, right? So the second thing, the most important thing here is all deployments are done to production. The only difference is there's an environment variable that tells me that this container is beta. So there is no beta servers, there's no dev servers, there's no test servers. It's all production. The only thing that's happening is, depending on the workload that's coming in, which has a signature that says this is beta workload, it gets routed to beta containers. So when I want to do production deployment, all I do is change environment variable and say this is no longer beta, this is production, and instantly you're live. Everybody asks about how long does it take to go to production. For us, 1 second. All you do is change environment variable and you're done. And that's basically what we are really trying to get to, right? And this is kind of like the controversial slide, is how do you make it agile? So the first thing that we did at Shippable was we took out SSH for everybody, including operations. No single human being in Shippable can actually go SSH into the box. And the reason is because when you SSH in, you're God. You can do anything you want. Right? You go make a change in the system and not tell anybody what you did, and after 6 months, suddenly somebody goes and tries to deploy it into another server and it just doesn't work. And you spend 3 days trying to figure out, and somebody says, oh, I installed that patch, and that's why it actually works in that server but not this server. So what we have said is, if you want to make a change to the server, if developers have to go through the pipeline of making changes through the entire flow, then operations goes the same way. You want to make a change, you write a script, run it through CI, go through the PR, implement it, so the patch gets applied onto the servers across the board. So it's all about creating consistency in the entire company. So that's the second thing. The second big controversial point is we don't branch. There's no branching. If anybody here says, I'm doing CD, I'm completely continuously deployable, and you do branching, you are not doing CD, period, right? That's the end of it. I mean, if you want to have a discussion about this afterwards, feel free, come, let's go get a beer, we'll talk about it. I can tell you, if you do branching, you're not doing CD, because you're doing all this crap, RI, FI, and whatever, BI, whatever you're doing, trying to get all these code bases to match. That means you're not continuously deployable, because the moment you do RI, all the things hit the fan. Everything doesn't work because there's whole prod changes happening which is on a completely different branch. You have a feature branch which is doing something else. You're doing all kinds of stuff. So we do forks. So you can fork and you can do whatever the hell you want in your fork, but when you merge on a PR, you're always merging to master. And you're always doing full CI on top of it. You know that master is deployable. So everybody thinks continuous deployment means I am pushing to production continuously. That's not true at all. Continuous deployment actually means I can push to production if I choose to without having to worry about anything breaking. That's all it means. That means this code I can push to production if I choose to and nothing happens. Maybe some features get enabled, maybe some features don't get enabled, but that's continuous deployment. It's really not, I'm not deploying continuously. I mean, that's basically a misnomer from my perspective. And then the most important thing, as I said, is feature flags, which is in-code branching, and that's what I said. We don't have a beta environment. We don't have a dev environment. The reason is because in the environment variables, we know what version this feature needs to get enabled on. And that's how we control how the whole system works. And then the most important thing is small frequent changes. Don't make any big bang changes. It's very, very small. Get it out into the customer. Try to see whether the customer uses it. Use beta user groups. We call it bug, unfortunately. And that's our beta user group. So that's where we put all the beta users, and they actually sign up to say, hey, I want to see new releases from you much faster, so put me on the bug group. That means there are going to be bugs. That's what it means. I mean, so that's how we do development. So if you do all those three, what you achieve is this frictionless pipeline. So to kind of put it in picture, so think of it as this, right? I make a change. There's an issue called 1 or 234 in this case. It's IU234 if you can't see it. So somebody wants to make a change on API. So what that does is it results in release 10. Release 9 was already done. So API new version of Docker container got created. R10 got created. So if you have multiple issues, multiple Rs get created. So you don't know what R is running where, but you have created all these Rs in your Docker registry, whether it's private, public, it doesn't matter. So if I have, what this means is I'm creating immutable images. So now if I have front end, it's the same concept. I have other issues. I have created R20, R21, R22 for just front end. So all of these are list of immutable stuff. Now let's talk about how our production fabric runs. So what we have is a container fabric. So it's a common fabric. Under this is VMs, or VMs, which we are completely abstracted. Those VMs can be across multiple clouds, across hybrid, whatever it is, because the next slide I'm going to talk about what I mean truly DevOps is in terms of this. So think of it as there's a fabric. Now I have a dev version of routing, which is just DNS routing at the macro level. And if I hit that route, R12 of API and R21 of FE gets run. It could be any container. All it is the traffic is getting changed based on the version of the container that I'm actually running on, whether it's dev, test, or production. So what I can do now is I can move between different environments with just a simple environment variable change. What version is it running? What Docker container is it running? And I'm pretty much done. It's all done through routing. Nothing is actually deployment. So everything that we build is already deployed. And that's how we think of it from a macro level. Any questions on this one? So this is kind of like, so if you do the all other three, you can achieve something like this. And this fabric allows you to get to this concept of like continuous deployment, if you want to think about it. So, sorry.
Just one question. So how do you do the testing in between? Say dev has different branches and Nvidia has different branches across.
I said no branching.
So I mean the different Docker containers.
Yes. So if you have different Docker container, it's just routing, right? So what I have is when I have to, so you do CI. CI is a misnomer for saying testing. Because what CI is about, you build kind of facades, or you kind of build proxies to what you're actually trying to use, and then you run short circuit all that processes and run tests. And say, you will say, let's say API, I want, let's say get account, right? What I'll do is I'll create a proxy stub for get account, and then run CI on top of it, and then get account passes. The issue with that is, what if get account itself is changing at the same pace as your UI is changing? How do you know your proxy is up to date with actually the real system, right? So what we have started doing is we are moving away from CI. What we are saying is CI is great, but if CI is green means nothing. It just means that it works on my machine. That's all it means, right? So the moment you put into integration environment, the live environment of FE is already there. So you're testing against the live service. So we have started doing functional testing. So all our CI tests, we just removed the stubs or the facades or whatever you create, or the mocks, whatever you want to call it. We removed all of that, and we test it against the live service. So when you're hitting that route, when I do dev.shippable.com, you're actually doing full integration testing at every single PR that's getting pushed. So that's how we get around this question. Did I answer your question? Yeah. So, anybody else? Yeah.
So
when you say that we are doing, I'm not talking about the DevOps. Let's consider the development life cycle. So in that, if we are doing API and feature, means all the things want to go in testing. So don't you think that that's going once we are building one feature and after that another feature and after that another feature? If we are removing CI, there are chances of failure, more failure of the features if there are dependency of the failures?
Actually, what I'm saying is you will find less failures if you're doing CI and nothing else. The reason is because if you have, let's say, a simple 3-tier app, I mean, that's what I was trying to explain to him. If you have a 3-tier app, let's say get account is an API that's sitting on API, right? Your UI requires get account to do login, right? For whatever reason, today I support login from GitHub, and I'm adding Bitbucket also. So I went and changed the account profile to an array instead of an object, right? But your facade or your mock is still having an object there. So your CI will pass. Okay, and you think you're golden, and you will push FE to production, or you think a CI has passed, I'm going to go, right? But the moment API gets upgraded to the latest version and it starts returning an array, your FE crashes. So you did CI, it was all green, it still didn't give you anything. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So what we have done is, now what we did is, we had about somewhere around 80,000 tests. What we did is we converted all of those tests into functional tests. Instead of saying, hey, let's go and just run against some mock or use some stub technology to actually do it. There's a ton of technologies out there which you can actually do stubbing around it. So we took out all of that stuff and we just said dev.shippable.com and devapi.shippable.com are actually live environments. They're actually containers that are running. I'm going to talk about it in the last, what I call as smart environments. That's basically what it is. And then you test against the live endpoints. It will give you the latest and greatest, and that is continuously deployed. So the moment anything changes, if R12 gets updated, immediately API gets updated. There's no questions asked. There's nobody asking you whether should I deploy API or not. It gets automatically deployed because I want to make sure my dev functional test is catching everything that could potentially break. The reverse of it is if, let's say in production, somebody finds an issue in our support thing, and we realize that this is an issue, we don't go fix it. The first thing we do is we break the functional test because somehow the functional test passed it and the customer saw it. So that means my functional test is not correct. So if there is a bug in production, my developers can't fix it. The only way they can fix it is they have to go write the functional test, break the functional test, and that automatically creates an issue in GitHub, which actually gets funneled into a chat room, it gets approved, and then the whole change happens, and the whole thing goes through, and functional test passes again, and you push to production. Make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah.
So the idea is always break the functional test first.
So this question has changed from the previous one.
Let me do this one thing. I'll get to your question. Let me just go through my slides. I'm running out of time, so I will get back after that. So sorry. So all of that was theory. This is what we do at Shippable. We ship 20 to 40 times every single day to production, okay? And this is running anywhere between 250 to 300,000 containers at any given point of time. And our production deployments do not have any window, okay? Because we are growing at 200% month over month. So yesterday's window is actually, or yesterday's peak is today's window. Because I've just grown 200% in traffic. So there's no point in going and saying I'm going to deploy at 1 a.m. in the night to 3 a.m. in the morning, all that stuff. You just deploy whenever you want to deploy. Because our system should handle all of that stuff, right? And we have 15 devs in 3 different time zones. And they do not have a single conference call. That's the goal. Because everything is in Slack. You can easily see everything. And my whole thing is communication is the bane of software development. So communicate more with yourself. So that means if you go to issue and start updating everything that you're doing and constantly saying, then no other developer will ping you on what the hell are you doing, because they can go read your issue and they can see everything that you've already done. So basically communication is the bane of software development, so communicate more with yourself. So that basically is the philosophy. And then our bug resolution to production is 2 hours. So if a customer reports a bug in production and we decide that we want to fix this, we can fix this in 2 hours. In live workflow, like things are already in planning, all that stuff, no branching. It's continuously deployable. So that's basically some of the facts that we have achieved. So with that being said, the way I define modern DevOps is this. It's complete decoupling of dev and operations. So everybody talks about dev and operations should work together. What I believe is it should be completely decoupled. That means it's very, very simple, right? If your operation person says, what application is running on your server, on this server, you're not doing DevOps. If your developer says, where is my application running, you're not doing DevOps, okay, or the modern DevOps. So that's basically what I'm trying to say. So an application should never care what server it's running on, and a server should never care what application is running on it. If you achieve it, you have actually achieved the elixir of life, which is DevOps, if you want, elixir of a software life, software developer's life. So that's basically how I think of it. So to kind of put this together, this is what Shippable platform is. So what we do is we don't vertically optimize our platform. We horizontally optimize. And the optimization is towards, I'm going to take everything possible from source code and put it into the customer's hand in the most fastest, frictionless, easy way. And that's what I define as modern DevOps. Okay, that's basically what it is. So we have two different products. Product in the middle is what our Shippable CI/CD is. If you're a fan of Jenkins, please free to use it, but still hook it into this pipeline. The right-hand side is what we call as Shippable Formations, which is what we call as smart containers, which is constantly watching all the changes that are happening on Docker Hub or private Docker registry, Google Container Registry, whatever you are using, and it watches for all those changes, and the moment that change occurs, as long as it's auto-deployable, your environment gets auto-deployed. You get a mobile text which says, hey, dev got tested, all functional tests have passed, do you want to deploy this to beta? You hit OK, and then it's automatically deployed to beta. And to do all of this stuff, if you write a single line of code, then we have failed. Right? I mean, that's the basic idea. So to get all of these things, you should be able to say, the day you decide my organization is going to embrace change and we want to be there, then we immediately tell you this is what you need to be successful. Or you can go about and try to do this all with shell scripts if you want to. So that's kind of how I think of it. So that's pretty much what I had, and you can try it. It's free. It's www.shippable.com. And of course, we are 18 seconds. Any questions? So, I mean, if I can't answer your question, that just makes my argument better. That's the only reason I want to hear from you. So I'm very open. If you didn't like something, if you don't agree with something, let's have a discussion. Let's get a beer, talk about it, whatever you want to do about it. So do you have a question? Yes.
What's the test coverage of your code?
The question was, what is the test coverage of our infrastructure? We try to strive between 65 to 75%. That's where we are. I mean, anything about that is not achievable. It's called, you know what theory of diminishing returns means? So there's a point where you should just say, you know what, this probably will never occur, and you should let it. And if it does occur, we'll get a bug open. We have 2 hours mean time, so we can fix it and get the functional test added.
So with that, you're able to come out of the function, like 2 hours to be able to,
yes.
change the function space.
Yes. So the idea is that we run about somewhere between 70 to 80,000 tests on every single run, and that's where distributed containers, fabrics of containers, all of that come into picture. So we can run things in parallel across 100 different containers. So we call it scatter and gather. A lot of this technology was all from Kinect. So in Kinect, we did that when I was with Kinect, and we have implemented all of that for DevOps workflows, if that makes sense.
So does it have an impact on your lead time for testing?
What do you mean by?
What lead time is your functional testing on lead?
So we break our testing into 3 groups. We call it core, which is our SLA for core is 10 minutes. So that tries to cover about 40 to 50% of the cases, most of the scenarios. Then we run daily something known as basic. At the end of the day, we try to catch all the issues, which is called basic, but core pretty much catches 90% of the situations. Basic it's a lot more intrusive, intensive stuff. And then what we do is once a week, we run this thing called complete, and that runs for about 10 hours. The basic runs for an hour. So every single developer is only waiting for 10 minutes to get the core test pass, and then depending on how many PRs are getting opened, we might run more number of basics, but typically we run once a day to see if anything went through the cracks. And if we are seeing the same test in basic fail again and again and again, we start thinking about moving that to core so that we can test it much more frequently at a developer level. Because if you do basic, you're kind of aggregated all the developers, so you kind of lose out some of the things I was saying. But 80% is what we are trying to strive for. If we can catch 80% of the bugs to the developer, attach it, we are doing pretty okay at that point of time.
And what is the scatter you're talking about?
So scatter, I mean, the question was what is scatter and gather? So one of the things that we do is we have this concept called matrix, which what it does is, let's say you have 100 tests, and you can run in 10 sets of parallel. So we can spin up 10 different containers, run all those 10 tests across 10, and then come back and gather the results and give you as though it ran on a single server, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and do you have any stats around what that meant for you in terms of your infrastructure costs?
We dropped our infrastructure cost by 72%. So our pitch, I mean, if you want a sales pitch, I'll give you a sales pitch for Shippable, right? Whatever your dev and test lab costs are, whatever cloud you're using, we will cut it by 70%. I keep 20, you keep 50.
What all tools do you use for managing your
So what all tools do we use to manage our infrastructure? I might get kicked out, but if I do kicked out, then we can talk about it. But we use Docker. All of our orchestration is through Kubernetes. We are the first company to kind of use Kubernetes in production. We're kind of doing the next leapfrog on top of it. We use Compose on developers' machines. I mean, these are all Docker terms. Sorry if people are not aware of Docker. Tomorrow, the whole day is about Docker. You should attend that. You'll probably learn a lot of stuff around Docker. And so I think that's the other thing. Our stack is built on Node.js. Backend is Mongo. Frontend is Angular. And we use Python for all the server-side code. We run on AWS, DigitalOcean, Google Cloud at this point of time. And hybrid. If you have a VMware stack or KVM stack or Xen stack on your premises. Sorry, Windows, I mean hypervisor too. Sorry?
containers are running on your public cloud?
No, yeah, we support 3 models. We have multi-tenant. I mean, all of this is on the website, so you should go check it out. Or send me an email. My email is avi@shippable.com. Feel free to send me an email. But it's basically multi-tenant, shippable hosted single tenant, and bring your own host single tenant. So those are the 3 business models. If you're on multi-tenant, it's running on our infrastructure. If it is shippable hosted, we will deploy an infrastructure for you, and it's managed for you on your behalf, but it's still your infrastructure. There is nobody else using it. Or the third option is bring your own hosts. Like if you have cloud credits or if you have your own VMware stack on your premises, you can bring your own hosts, and we have a licensing fee on that.
So for the questions there earlier, so there was so you were able to resolve customers' issue in 2 hours, within 2 hours, even though you through first creating that fix, the issue, I mean create the test and then break that and then follow at fix.
Yes.
How is it possible? Because just
We have superstar developers. No, I think it's basically this, right? I mean, what you're doing is everything. If you look at our code base, it's completely templatization. So have you heard of the term Toyota Way? Do you know what Toyota Way means? So there's a book called The Machine That Changed the World. If you get a chance, read that book, right? We have implemented every single practice of the machine that changed the world for software development. And that's why it's possible. So if you look at our code base, and I give you my entire code base, you will not be able to tell who wrote what piece of code, because it looks identical. Because we do not allow even a comma, even everything. So we are militant about style sheets, linting, all of that stuff. We are militant about it because our code quality has to be at the highest. So somebody was talking about technical debt just now. All of this, if you don't do, you are going to accumulate technical debt and you will not be able to change. So our philosophy is, I mean, I'll give you a story, right? We had 4 interns in US team who joined us, and they had never ever worked for any company in their entire life. I mean, they had only worked on projects for their professors. They shipped 75% of our WW code. And they did it within 3 days of joining Shippable. because it was so easy. All you needed to know was Angular and JavaScript, and you looked at the templates. You just had to say, okay, that's the template, I'm going to do it again. All it is about is thinking, design, business logic, and that's about it. You should not spend any time thinking about how to log, what error to write, what to do, how many commas to put. All of that you should not think about. You should only think about design. Make sure your code is abstracted. Make sure you have separation of concerns. Do all of that stuff. The higher order of developer thinking is what we strive for. The lower order of developer coding should be almost like, hey, I woke up and brushed my teeth. I mean, that's kind of how we think about it. Make sense? Sorry, I'm going to leave. So if you have more questions, just catch hold of me. And also, we just started our India office. If you're looking for a more challenging role or whatever you want to change in career, reach out to us. We just hired 14 people last weekend. So we still have another 20 positions. So just feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.